Hi counselors, we're back for Classroom Guidance Magic, step number 4, which is all about interactive instruction. So at this point, you have planned your lesson, you had an amazing hook that got your students interested from the get-go, and now it's time to give some sort of direct instruction on your topic. So before we totally dive into this video, I want to make something really clear right away. I do not hate PowerPoint. I might say some things in this video that might make you think that I hate PowerPoint, and that is not the case. I think it is a great tool as long as it is being used for engagement and not for a lecture. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about interactive instruction. So for most of your lessons, you're going to have some sort of instructional component where you're teaching the students about your topic. Maybe you're teaching them about the steps involved in conflict resolution, or maybe you're teaching them about the parts of the brain. Whatever your topic is, instruction can be pretty dull if it's just you standing in front of a PowerPoint for 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, so the goal here is to get our students involved in the instruction, to get them engaged mentally, physically, or emotionally, whatever your topic may be, but we want them to be invested in the instructional piece. This isn't just a solo performance. It isn't just you talking at them. It's a way for them to get involved as well. Okay, so I think a lot of us can tend to fall back on that PowerPoint lecture structure because it's easy, it's familiar, it's comfortable, and it's probably the way that we all received our last instruction in grad school. But it doesn't necessarily fit for our students and our lesson topics all of the time. Okay, so we want to find ways to get them involved because it's just crucial for buy-in and for retention for whatever you're teaching. You want your students to know that it's important, so you want them to know that it's valuable information for them, and you want them to remember it afterwards. You don't want it to just be information that they get in the classroom and then never think about again. Okay, so let's talk about some ways that you can make your instruction interactive. So one of my favorite ways to liven up what could be maybe a dull lecture topic is to make a movement semicircle. So this works really well when you're covering something like parts of the brain or something where there are a lot of little parts to your lesson. So I do use a PowerPoint for this. I use it as a visual reference to keep us on topic and to give students a visual example of what we're talking about. So I will stand in the front where the board is, and I'll have my slides behind me, and I'll have the students make a semicircle around me. So the students are able to see me, they're able to see the board, and they're all able to see one another as well. So for the parts of the brain, I'll just stick with this example. I'll show a slide that shows where the part of the brain is and has some bullet points about what it's responsible for. So then I'll have the students work together to come up with a movement that represents what that part of the brain does. Okay, so if they're talking about the cerebellum, they may do this like they're walking on a balance beam. Okay, so that's just the movement that represents what that area of the brain does. Now, you can have your whole group choose a movement together, or you can ask one student to make the movement and then everyone repeats it. So after we come up with our movement, I reiterate the name of the part of the brain and I briefly go over what it does again. Then we all say the name together and we all do the movement together. So then as we continue through the lesson, we build on that. So when we move on to the second part of the brain, we do the movement for the first part and for the second part. So by the end, they have this whole chain of movements that represents each part of the brain. They really remember it this way. Actually moving their bodies, of course, helps them learn and remember the parts of the brain. And it's really fun. They're engaged, they're all involved. And it just makes what could be a dull topic not so dull after all. Okay, so you can use these movement semicircles for lots of other topics too. I recently used it with my 7th graders when we were talking about the stress response system. So we did fight, flight, or freeze, and I had my students come up with movements for each of those. So for fight, they did like karate hands. Flight, they just jogged in place, and for freeze, they had their hands up like this. So then I showed an image on the screen of a stressor. So I showed things like a big bear or a fire, and then I told them just use their gut reaction to act out what they would do in that situation, whether they would fight, flee, or freeze. Okay, so that was just a really easy way to get everyone involved, everyone out of their seats. Every single student was participating, and they really understood the concept. So my exit data for that lesson showed that they really grasped the information. They understood what happened with fight, flight, or freeze, so I would call it a success for that one. Okay, so another strategy that you can use to get your students involved in the instructional component is to act it out. You're probably doing this in a lot of ways already, but something that I am kind of guilty of in the past was that I would do a lecture style instruction segment on something and then have the students act it out afterwards. So instead of breaking down each step in their acting it out process, I was having them synthesize it all at once. But now what I do is I have them act out each step if it's a step process, like with conflict resolution. So I'll have 2 students come up to the front I'll review the first step in a positive conflict resolution and they will act it out immediately. Then we'll move on to the second step, they'll act that out immediately. So rather than having to look back and act it out all at once, they're breaking it down into individual pieces. So that gets 2, maybe 3 students really involved, but an easy way to get everyone else involved is to have someone suggest the topic for the conflict resolution. After you do the first step, have someone else maybe summarize what happened. Have another person offer a suggestion for another way to improve that step. And then you just go through everyone else as you're moving along. So everybody gets involved, everybody can share their experiences if they want to. So the students are really invested in how the role play goes. They're directing and orchestrating the whole thing. So that's just a simple way to take an acted out process and stretch it out over your whole instructional piece. Okay, now this is another way to get your students really interested. This isn't necessarily a way that they are directing the instruction themselves, but to get them really mentally engaged and excited about the instructional component, you can bring in an expert. So nothing gets students more excited than seeing a new face in front. They all want to know why the person's there and what they have to say. So this doesn't have to be a super planned out process like a career fair would be. You can just find a parent who is a subject matter expert on your topic and ask them to give maybe a 10-minute presentation on it. Parents really want to be involved, and they're much more likely to say yes if you only need them to prepare something that's going to take 10 minutes rather than 45 for a whole lesson. Okay, so they can stick around and help you with your interactive activity afterwards, or they can just be there for the instructional piece if that's what their schedule allows. So here are a few ideas, and remember, these don't have to be career-focused lessons. I know that's where my mind tends to go when I think about parents coming in, but it doesn't have to be focused on careers. That is a bonus if that's related, but you could have like a parent who teaches yoga or even practices yoga come in and talk about the health benefits of yoga. You could have a parent who is a legal mediator come in and talk about conflict resolution or peer mediation. You can have a parent who works in any kind of team setting talk about team building or working in diverse groups. And these are just parents. You can always pull into your community resources as well to do a mini lesson or a whole lesson. We have a local agency who focuses on teen drug prevention, and they come in and teach lessons on different types of drugs. They teach lesson on refusal skills, and it's all totally free. The kids love having a new face in there. They like getting to know someone else, and it's great for community engagement. So just off the top of my head, here are a few more people that you could pull in as experts. You could have someone who works at a nonprofit present on compassion. Maybe you could even bring a grandparent in to talk about support systems. You could have a parent who is a nurse or a medical professional come in and talk about healthy habits. You could have a parent who teaches martial arts come in and talk about self-control. So these are all just really great ways to get parents and community involved in your lesson and to get your students interested by letting them hear from someone new. It's great for career exposure too. Okay, so let's switch gears for just a second. Another surefire way to get your students involved in the actual instruction piece is to have them do some sort of inquiry and then present their findings. So here's what I mean. Give your students specific websites to visit or handouts to review. If you have tablets or computers that you can use in your lessons, you can give them specific sites to go to and review information. If you don't have that, just print it out beforehand and let them review the printed materials. You can have them record their big takeaways and present as individuals or small groups, however you're grouping them for this assignment. And then in this format, they are actually giving the instruction. They are teaching each other about the topic, and they're finding the information on their own and using their own language to tell each other about the topic. So you can, of course, fill in the gaps where you need to, but nothing is more interactive than students providing the instruction to one another. Okay, this isn't, also I just want to mention, this isn't an internet free-for-all where they're just Googling topics that you're covering. So you want to send them to really specific links that you vetted and make sure they're reputable sources of information. Okay, so here is an example. When I was teaching a unit on mindfulness, I broke my students into 4 groups, and I used children's books as the hook for my lesson. So I gave each group a children's book about mindfulness. They read it together and then just gave me some ideas about what they thought mindfulness was based on the books that they read. Then in their small groups, I gave each group a specific topic to review. And I sent one group to some websites that reviewed the physical health benefits of mindfulness. Another group visited sites that talked about the emotional and mental benefits of mindfulness. Another group reviewed some sites that talked about what mindfulness actually is and how to do it. And then the 4th group reviewed some websites and they listened to or watched some actual mindfulness activity so that they could better understand how to practice mindfulness. Then, after they reviewed all of these things, they came together and they presented on their topic to the other students. So they were giving the instructions, they became subject matter experts in their own topics that they researched and gave the instruction to one another. And because I vetted the sites beforehand, I didn't have to fill in any gaps. They got what they needed from the websites that I gave them. So I wasn't actually giving any of the instruction in this scenario. The students were responsible for it. So it freed up my time to move around and answer questions as I needed to. It gave me more time to ask higher level questions to some of the students and get them thinking down the road to what they might want to learn more about for mindfulness. So it was a really cool process. And basically all I did was synthesize the information and just made an anchor chart about mindfulness and the benefits and how to do it while they presented the information. So every student is involved in the process. They're taking responsibility for their own learning, and it's just a really cool process to see how they all take ownership of it. Okay, so I have one final tip to liven up your instruction and get students engaged. If a movement circle or acting it out doesn't quite fit with your topic, maybe you can't get an expert in to talk about it, or you don't have technology or time to print things for a web quest, just bring a ball. Okay, students of all ages are immediately invested in a lesson when there is a ball to be tossed or a ball to be caught. Seriously. I know it sounds simple, you're probably already doing this in a lot of different ways, but tossing a ball to call on a student during instruction gets students involved and engaged so easily. You can use it as a way to call on them to answer a question or to let them share their own experiences or prior knowledge about the topic. When they see a ball, they all immediately turn into golden retrievers and they want to play. Okay, so counselors, this is the end of the video on step number 4, interactive instruction. So our goal here is to get students involved in the instruction process, get them mentally and physically engaged, make sure nobody's getting left behind, and we want to get them excited to ensure that they are buying in and retaining our information from our lessons. Okay, so your challenge for this step is to think back to a lesson that you've had before that maybe was kind of a dud, maybe the students weren't all that invested, or maybe your exit survey revealed that they didn't get it as much as you hoped that they would. Think about that lesson and now think of 2 ways to liven it up and get more interactive instruction when you reteach it to another class or reteach it another year. Okay, jot these down in your workbook and post it to the Facebook group in the Step 4 Challenge album. Okay, I will see you soon for Step 5, which is all about hands-on practice, my favorite topic. Okay, bye for now.